Well, one of the first full-length sermons that I ever preached was on Ascension Day. It was 2006 at St Stephen's Church in East Twickenham and part of my ordination training. And like many things you do for the first time, it has stayed in my memory. I remember the preparation, my nervousness, and the relief when it was over. Well, today, you may know, is Ascension Day. It comes exactly 40 days after Easter and is the culmination of Jesus' resurrection appearances, the occasions on which the risen Jesus came to his disciples and let them know that he really was alive. And then, after 40 days, he ascended into heaven, returning to his heavenly Father. Luke tells us that as the disciples were watching, Jesus was lifted up and a cloud took him out of their sight. Well, for me, as I preach my first sermon, Jesus' ascension is about holding both an earthly and a heavenly perspective, embracing them both together. I remember using the image of bifocal glasses long before needing to wear bifocal or now varifocal glasses myself. Here they are, and I'm still struggling to get used to them. Well, Jesus perfectly held both an earthly and a heavenly perspective. He lived a full and fruitful life on earth, fulfilling his Father's will, seeking out the poor and the lost, and giving his life for those he loved. And then he returned to his Father in heaven and is now seated at his Father's right hand and praying for us that we might follow in his footsteps. Well, in these very strange times, I think we need to keep that dual perspective. We need to think very carefully about how we live our lives now. That's particularly true as the initial lockdown begins to loosen and we have to take more responsibility for our actions. In some ways, it was easier when the message was very clear: stay at home, save the NHS, save lives. Now it's more complex. Should we send our children back to school next month? Is it safe to go out and meet with family members or friends? How do we plan for the future when so much is still so unknown? And do we simply go back to normal? Or are there really important things that we've been learning during these times that we need to take forward into the future? They're challenging questions, and as Christians we need to wrestle with them, to think and pray and consider carefully how we live during these times. But Jesus' ascension also reminds us that we need to keep a heavenly perspective. We need to have one eye on earthly things and one eye, perhaps one lens of our glasses, on our heavenly home. Sadly, I've taken many funerals over the past 2 months, more in fact than I took during the whole of last year. But the funeral liturgy wonderfully encourages us to lift our eyes beyond the present, to look beyond a simply earthbound perspective. It calls us to fix our eyes on our heavenly home, remembering those beautiful words of Jesus: "In my Father's house there are many dwelling places. I go to prepare a place for you." For if we're able to keep our eyes on the goal, on the end point, we'll be better able to live well in the present. If we know our journey's end, we will be able to travel wisely and well through these very challenging days. And so, please do join together at 8 o'clock this evening if you're able to for our Ascension Day service. It'll be our first online communion service together, and we'll remember Jesus, our earthly Lord and our heavenly King.